You're experiencing the Authentic Chaos Podcast, an exploration into our inner selves and journeys of self-discovery. I'm your host, Vahagan Yernosian, and joining me today, once again, is Yossi Katzin.
Hey there.
Thanks for joining us again, Yossi, and it's great to have you in the studio here in Seattle.
Instead of in New York, which is where I was last time.
Yeah, you're really just traveling around.
Well, yeah, I'm living both places. I've got roommates in both places, so I'm not just like taking up space.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, but I love it. Well, it's weird. It feels very odd and extravagant. I don't like having a lot of money. I don't want to have more money than other people, and I feel weird using it like this. But you know what? It's not going to be forever, and I'm trying to become who I'm going to be next, and that's part of what being in New York is for.
Yeah, and you don't have to let the money be a factor in how you relate to people or how you connect with people, right?
Of course.
So even if we're privileged to have enough saved away, it doesn't mean we have to lord it over people.
No, but you should have in mind that like the experiences, the way you're going through the world is different. You're dealing with different things, right? I think I talked about this last time. You don't have the stressors, or the stressors are different. The things that are like difficult for people, paycheck to paycheck stuff, I'm not having to deal with.
Yeah.
And that means that when I can be like chill about things, other people are not necessarily in the same, headspace, and that's normal. That feels normal. And I think, giving other people more grace because they have all the extra weight on them that I don't have right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful sentiment on like empathy, right? Like I have so many, I know so many people who are in a similar position to us, but don't quite understand that level. And so especially when we talk about things like unhoused or like people on the streets, there's a lot more judgment around it because there's this idea of like, well, what were the personal choices that they made to get there versus like it's just chance.
Yeah, it is chance to a big extent, and luck, chance, and all that. And there's a lot of effort that goes into it. I think I don't give myself enough credit for the effort I've put in.
Yeah.
But it feels like this could have happened to somebody else. This could have not happened to me. I could have been much less fortunate, and it's not all, coming to me.
Yeah.
So everybody else that doesn't have these things should also be allowed the opportunities for personal creativity and lack of stress that we've been able to achieve.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I agree. Like being able to have enough of your needs met where you can start to express your creativity is like a great place to be. And like personally, I think that the whole goal of government should be to get to that state, like satisfying the basic needs, like house people, feed people, give people water, get their basic needs met. And so that people can start like embracing their creativity and like achieving more. Like we have so many technical developments, right? I had a chat with a friend about capitalism, and he's like, well, hasn't capitalism added a lot of good to our lives? And I like to say it's added a lot of complexity to our lives.
But complexity comes out of any big group of people.
Oh yeah.
Anything that you're trying to accomplish that's big, you need big organization. Like I was talking with a friend about the Burning Man stuff, and we can go either way with this because the thing you were just talking about with housing and feeding, that could go into the ethical mega corporation thing, or there's this about like somebody was complaining about it costs a lot of money to go to Burning Man.
Yeah.
And part of that is buying all the stuff you need, but part of it is paying for the ticket. And the ticket was this year I think $575.
Yeah.
And it costs money because there's an organization making the city and providing all the things that we need and paying people. And there are full-time jobs. There are like within their organization, there are people that they're paying outside, like people to come in and deal with the porta potties.
Yeah.
And anytime that you have a large group of people and a system, you need bureaucracy. You need complexity.
Yes, I fully agree.
Yeah.
And I guess my concern is that we reward the maybe people in the wrong way, like the people that clean the porta potties, right? The people that clean our sewers, the janitors, should be compensated way more because I don't want to do that
No,
job.
I do not
You don't
want to do that. No,
job.
no. I think that one ideal would be that we provide for all of the basic needs of people, and we pay pay them in part like to do the thing that they love. Part of the time, maybe they should do their own creative stuff. Part of the time, they should do things that other people, need
Yeah.
people for. But it needs to be something that you want to do.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing, that it's your intentional choice. It's your
Yeah.
decision to make this rather than there's so much obligation
Yeah.
to using your time to go to work.
Right. And you become a worker for somebody else's project.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe in that project, then your work life sucks. You're annoyed because you're like, I don't care about this.
And if your work life sucks, that's at least a third of your day.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard to like, and I say that there's also this like mental and emotional labor that goes
Yeah,
into it.
absolutely.
Like so many times I've come home after like after working and been just exhausted. And like, that's it. My day is done even at like 5 p.m. because I'm
Yeah.
just too tired to do anything else.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the jobs, especially minimum wage, they're not really paying for your emotional labor.
No.
But they expect it of you because they want you to be pleasant to customers and be, team spirit and all that.
Oh my God, I
But-
can't even imagine. Like
Yeah.
we had like desk jobs. Like if
Yeah.
I had to work with people and like put on a good face, like that would be
for
yeah.
somebody who isn't going to be continuing to work around you and therefore, needs to work well with you.
Yeah.
But somebody who's coming in and wants something from you and would like it now, please.
Yeah.
May not say please.
And may or may not even view you as a human being.
Yeah, right. The emotional labor that you're doing there is uncompensated.
Yeah.
You're basically paid to be there and be a cog in the machine, but you're expected to be a cog with a smiley face on it.
yeah. You're expected to be like, oh, well, put a smile on, have a good attitude.
Yeah.
Like how much energy, like that takes a lot of energy to
does,
be
yeah.
constantly in a good mood.
Yeah, or especially you're not actually going to be, so you got to pretend. You
Yeah,
gotta
that's where it's even worse.
Inauthentic.
Inauthentic, yeah. I like to rant about LinkedIn for that same
Okay.
manner because for me, LinkedIn is that exact vibe of like inauthenticity. Like everyone is just trying to put on the nicest face they can and show how excited they are for these projects that you talked.
Yeah, you're saying like maybe you find this exciting, but I don't really relate to you finding this new businessy type thing exciting. This like, oh, we're going to be able to provide our customers with what they need in order to move money around and shit.
Yeah.
I don't care. It, like,
Yeah.
maybe you care, but
But I bet if we were to go to a bar, your real feelings would come out.
this is you're using the energy that you would expect when somebody is like, I'm so excited to be providing puppies to everybody.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, the puppies and the moving money around are not the same, and they don't feel the same, and it's unusual that you would seem to be as happy about the one as the other.
Yeah. So let's use this. So you've had let's use this as a segue going back to Burning Man.
Sure.
So you're at Burning Man.
I was at Burning Man, yeah.
For our audience, would you who may not be as experienced with Burning Man, how would you describe it?
Oh, I would love to. I look at Burning Man as an experimental approach to alternative society. Basically, what society could be if we all had the resources, sort of exploring principles that could then be applied back to the real world. I was talking with some friends last night. One of them was complaining about, or objecting, I'd say, that this isn't a good model. 51 weeks out of the year, you work, you get your high-paying job, and then you go off and party in the desert for a while, do a bunch of drugs, have a bunch of sex, look at some art, burn a bunch of shit.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not meant to be. I can't speak for what everybody means for it to be. I don't think it's meant to be a 1 week out of the year party. I think it's meant to be exploring and reinforcing certain principles in us. There's 10 principles. I don't remember all of them, but stuff like self-reliance. Actually, I did pull it up, so I can just say what they are. The 10 principles of Burning Man. And they use the word radical a lot here. So radical inclusion, gifting, decommodification, radical self-reliance, radical self-expression, communal effort, civic responsibility, leave no trace, participation, immediacy, and the 11th principle that isn't on this list is consent. So I think there's a lot of stuff in here that's really good that if you could expand these to the rest of the world, we could have it be a better place. Like gifting is one that I like. I feel like going to Burning Man has made me want to give people things more and to feel like you don't need to deserve this thing. You don't need to earn it. I want to provide you with housing. I want to provide you with the basics that you need to make sure that you don't die and to give you a springboard from which to live in the rest of your life. And I want to give that to you because, I don't want you to buy it from me. I just want to give it to you. I want that to be the thing that everybody gets.
Yeah, it's interesting because that also kind of goes in the way you framed it goes into decommodification too.
Yeah, which is also the second thing there.
Yeah, because like we like in our like capitalist lives, we like to think of, especially in the U.S., housing isn't a place you live. Housing is an investment. Housing is a commodity. Housing is part of your portfolio.
Right. Well, if you get to buy it. Right?
Yeah. If you get to buy it, but we were constantly taught like that we should be buying it. Like home ownership is a critical part of like doing anything. But then of course, homes get expensive and like lots of forces that are outside of our control make it completely unattainable. And so what is it about Burning Man that made you more like kind of got you to be more change your view about gifting or make you feel like gifting isn't a more important part of your life than it was before?
Well, I guess for one thing, I'm bad at giving gifts. My parents were bad at giving gifts. Hi, Mom and Dad. They're probably not gonna watch this.
I can relate. I can relate.
Yeah. And so that's sort of the backdrop. Like, I'm not so good at just giving people things, or at least not at seeking out the thing that I want to give them. Would be a different thing, I guess. Like a personalized gift, I'm still pretty bad at. But gifting, like giving the things that people want, or like if I wish to give somebody something, so you asked like how did I get better at this, I suppose?
Or like what about Burning Man inspired you to like want to make it a bigger part of your life?
Well, I think that there's a lot of beauty in being able to offer somebody something without expecting anything in return. And a lot of people have, it is normal to have misconceptions about things you're not exposed to. People have misconceptions about Burning Man that it's like, oh, we can't use money, but we're bartering. But we don't barter. We give things and don't expect anything in return.
Right. It's less of a market because like bartering is still like oh, I'll give you this fish for
you
your
want
egg.
this thing. I mean, there is unofficially. I guess there's like we'll do you this favor, and then it's kind of likely that you'll do a favor back.
But it's like mutual. It's more of mutual gift giving, rather than
it's
like a requirement or an expectation.
And it's gauche to be like it's not cool to be like, oh, I gave you this thing, so I want a thing back.
Yeah.
But there is certainly some sort of expectation. Like these things are still ingrained in us. It's difficult to move outside of a market completely. And
I mean, markets and like trading has been around well before any like developed economic system that we use today. Like it's a pretty old part of us.
Yeah. I think Burning Man is actually like if we manage to get to a utopian state, a post-scarcity state, how would we want to live? And Burning Man, there's a lot of investment that goes into it, a lot of money that goes into it to get to the point where you can be post-scarcity for a week.
Yeah.
Right. So it costs money to simulate this utopia, but the experiment isn't how can we achieve this, it's what can we do if we have it. And I think the gifting, it feels really good to be able to. One of my favorite things that I have from Burning Man, I was having a rough night, I think on Wednesday. The thing is about Sunday through Sunday. And I got there on the Thursday to help set up, and that makes the week longer and harder. And I was having a rough time by the Wednesday because I had gotten my bike misplaced.
Oh, okay.
And you need a bike to get around. And I was near the man, which is like the central piece, the thing that burns, the thing that everybody knows about. And I was, sitting, having a rough time, looking pretty glum. So folks came up to me and gave me some of their time, gave me recognition, and one of them gave me a shawl or like a scarf.
Yeah. Yeah, like a big scarf.
A big scarf, yeah. That I use as a central part of my costume. Like wherever I go in Burning Man, I wear that, like to cover myself from the sun, or just to put it in my jeans as like a flowy thing. And that was just something somebody gave me, and I texted her a little afterwards, like the next year, but I haven't seen her since then.
Yeah.
And I've never had the opportunity to give her anything.
Yeah.
And I don't have to. If I see her again, I will try to, because I have good feeling towards her, but also because she's just another person there. But I love the there's a person in need, I want to give them something.
Yeah.
And I'm not very good at that. Like, I'm not very good at giving money to organizations.
Yeah.
I still have some difficulty parting with money. But if I see a homeless person, I'm working on trying, I want to give them something. Because they're a person right in front of me who needs something.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to give people things that they will enjoy and that they need.
Yeah.
And I think there is certainly a lot to be said for, I feel like I've earned this thing, I've accomplished it, I've managed to support myself, and some of the feedback I've gotten about wanting to provide people with the basics is that, well, then there's the feeling of accomplishment is gone for them. And so I think that there's a balance there that I haven't found yet. But the idea that people can live their conscious experience, the only one that we got, I think, and not have it be shit, is like, and not be full of pain and suffering, would be good.
Yeah, and we talked about this last time. We talked about how, like, what is there is some value in that pain,
Right?
But at some point there's also pain in that pain, and
Yeah.
like you don't always have, and like, so yeah, you're trying to, I understand, like trying to like go thread this needle, this very fine line where you can help people out without like taking from their journey.
Yeah.
And but maybe like in small acts of kindness and giving, it's like maybe that's enough for now. Maybe part of it is like that consent thing, right? Like, because people can not consent to a gift.
Sure. Yeah. You at Burning Man, when you give a gift, you offer it.
Yeah.
And a person can say no.
Yeah.
They can say yes, and then they can retract it. There's a lot of consent is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Giving somebody, like, drugs is a big thing at Burning Man. Giving somebody a drug they don't intend to take is real bad.
Violation of consent.
It is
for
absolutely,
sure.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's a bad one.
And even in like your day-to-day life, like if you see, like, maybe I wouldn't give $1 to like any random person I pass on the street.
Yeah.
But if someone asks, and if I'm like, and if I feel like, or I've got some cash, I'll give.
Right.
Like, because they asked, they clearly consent, and then it's up to me to consent.
Yeah, sure.
So like maybe that's part of it, right? Like not just, you don't have to like give everyone advice in their lives or like help everyone out with the pain that they have, because maybe they're just expressing their pain, and maybe they're going through it and that's their journey, but they don't want you to like solve their problems for them.
Yeah, I think as far as the advice thing and solving somebody else's problem, there's a lot of like, oh yeah, a person needs to actually be asking for that because you don't want to impose on them your presence and your opinion, because it's rude and it's unpleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't want it.
They didn't want it. Yeah. If somebody doesn't ask for something, then don't expect them to accept it. Don't expect that they're going to definitely accept it. They might not. Yeah. Everybody has the chance to opt out of things. And, you know, in an ideal world under ideal conditions, and we would like to make these conditions as ideal as possible.
And, you know, I know some people get upset when other people don't like take their advice or like accept their help. And, you know, I've felt like that in the past. And to that, I'd say, like, I'd question, like, if we're feeling like this because someone isn't taking our help, then who are we really doing this for? Them or for us? And then maybe, and that for me was eye-opening, that like maybe I was doing this more for me and what I thought of as the ideal like connection between us, rather than what, like, respecting what they wanted to do and the conscious decisions they make.
Totally.
Yeah.
I had something on that about, but
it's okay.
Yeah.
We can like wheel this back a little bit to Burning Man. Sure. So, you mentioned how it's a model for how society could be.
Or I think it's an opportunity to explore these principles.
Okay.
It's not itself a model. Like, the idea is not that people go live out in the desert, certainly.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, like a lot of the news, of course, has like latched on to the fact that it is is a very big portion of very wealthy people going.
Yeah.
And even besides that, there's another big portion of like techies who maybe aren't the ultra wealthy,
right,
but are still like wealthy enough where like spending a couple grand to go to this thing and being able to take time off of work isn't a big deal.
Like us.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. There was somebody who had been going for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
Somebody who was publishing like the Black Rock City Weekly, like, you know, a little newspaper-y thing.
Oh, that's cute.
And she, I didn't read the whole article, but it was the front page that she put this time, and she was like, I have been going for decades. It has changed a lot, and I think this might be the last time I go because I'm being priced out.
Yeah.
And it does change over time. And I think we shouldn't be trying to keep things exactly the same because change happens. But when something changes underneath you, it's very unpleasant.
Yeah. And so maybe this is an interesting like portal to the past a bit. Because from my understanding, Burning Man started as this very like counterculture revolution kind of thing. Like the whole point of the effigy, of burning the effigy, is that you're burning the effigy of the man,
right? The
system, the government, the corporations, all of that. And it started off as just a bunch of hippies going to the desert, like spending a couple bucks on their gear and like having a good time.
Yeah.
And of course, much like a lot of things in our society, same with like other festivals, it's become more and more commodified, in a sense, or there's some of that commodification corruption.
I'd say it becomes more engineered, like the.
Well, let me explain why I think it's more commodified.
Yeah.
Because with people who are attending, and the more resources they have as they come to attend, they're basically just play camping.
A lot of people, yeah.
And then you have situations, and I think it's worth, like, even if it's not the heart of the event, I think it's still worth like looking at the shadows of the event. Like
Sure.
you have people like 5 years ago that like they literally flew in like fresh bluefin tuna from Spain so they
Really?
could have a fancy dinner at Burning Man. Yeah, it was
I did
some
not know
Google
that. Holy shit.
employees in 2017. Yeah, something like that. And like, you know, Mark Zuckerberg flew in one day to like make grilled cheese sandwiches a couple years ago. Like there is a whole other side of like the nouveau riche, like really taking advantage of this cultural moment to like pretend to be like basically pretend to be poor or pretend to be in this scarce environment.
Sure.
And I think that's an interesting point of like, yeah, it is pricing out the people that like we're creating so much culture, like this lady going 30 years in a row and like producing this like periodical for the event. Like that's a huge piece of culture that could be lost because of this. And you know, culture gets lost all the time, right? Culture changes all the time, and I guess it's more of a question of is this a change that we want to happen or that you want to happen?
Well, we don't, in any group of people, you don't get to choose how the group decides things, right? We don't get to shape society in our image.
But it kind of, well, we don't,
Right. No.
but the rich do. I view this as like a bit of I'm viewing this in the lens of colonialism.
Okay.
I've been reading a lot about like about empires and colonialism, and so this appears to me like when the European empires basically discovered Polynesia, right? I've been reading a book on the Polynesians because I had no idea anything about them, and it's super fascinating, all their rich oral histories. But when the Europeans came, then they came with new ideas, or they came with like a purpose, like more. They had the resources, they had God on their side, or whatever, and they like the culture shifted over time. But maybe it wasn't what was going to happen organically without that like intentional influence, because like the Europeans like came in, especially the Protestants and the Catholics and stuff, and the evangelicals came in with the express purpose of changing the culture to become a more Christian culture. And to go back to Burning Man, when you have so many people with so much resources that they can like make these camps that are like $2 million a tent, or like basically create this these high concentrations of wealth, then they can have like an outsized impact on that culture.
I think that's fair. I don't know what to do about that sort of thing, because I think there's not exactly anonymity, but like you don't have to use your real name at Burning Man.
Yeah.
You can call yourself whatever you want.
Sure.
And like, I don't know if we ought to have a purity test for people to be able to come. I mean, I guess what we have right now is a monetary test, which isn't good.
Yeah.
The people in my camp, at least my old camp lead, who you know, who we went to school with, she doesn't like she thinks if you have a shower at Burning Man, it's weird. Like, you know,
yeah, it defeats the whole purpose. There's
Kinda,
not supposed to be indoor plumbing.
Right. You know, you're going in an RV. It's pretty weird.
Yeah.
You should be roughing it. It should be difficult. You shouldn't be doing all these things that make it easy. And if you have something that makes it easy, it should be something that you made. So like our camp had solar panels, and like we could charge our stuff this year.
Yeah, that's
because
awesome.
some of our camp did that, right? And they did invest money. They did invest time, and so they had enough of both of those things to do it. And you could argue that it should just be what people can accomplish there. That if you're bringing all this stuff that you did outside, then you're at an advantage over other people.
Yeah.
But it's not meant to be a competition. Although I suppose anything where you're comparing things is kind of a competition.
It can be if you want it to be a
Right.
competition.
Right.
Or you could view it as like the same way you view as art exhibits, right? Like we don't look at art and we're like, man, I want to do something better than that.
Yeah. Right. Well, I do sometimes. When I look at books, I'm like, oh my God, how did they do this? Oh, I wish my first book was going to be as good as this first book.
I mean, to be fair, you are you are a working author.
That's what I'm talking
so-
about. Yeah. You mean like if you're an artist, I guess you would look at an art and be like, fuck, I want to do that.
Maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that I think this is a good question as to the whole what change are the rich people bringing? What does it mean when people can fly in?
Yeah, like why does Black Rock City need an airport?
Yeah, that is a good question. I don't have a good answer, which is I'm gonna pat myself on the back a little for remembering to say I don't know.
It's good. We could all use a little bit
Yeah.
more. I don't know. I get into trouble for that all the time by saying things that I'm like, wait a minute, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the most important things I think is to recognize that you can be wrong, and sometimes
Yeah.
you're gonna be.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I don't know much.
Yeah, right. I know a lot, but not that
Yeah.
much.
But like, but going back to the airport, I find it so interesting because like, how can you like the whole like it seems like more and more of these adjustments that have been made to satisfy the rich have like kind of gone against some of these like principles. Like, how can you really leave no trace if like private jets are flying in and out? Like,
Well, I mean, you can leave no trace on the playa, right? On
Yeah.
the desert there.
but even then, like locals complain all the time about how like in the past, like, I don't know, several years, there hasn't been enough cleanup.
Okay.
There's been a lot more trash that the counties then have to clean up afterwards.
You mean like people going and well, yeah. So I guess what you're saying is even if you tell people, hey, don't dump things in people's like garbage cans
Yeah.
and take it to a real dump and pay the dump for it,
Yeah.
it's still there are going to be a lot of people who don't follow the rules as intended.
Yeah.
And what should you do when the rules as intended aren't being followed, and therefore, and as a consequence of the thing that you're doing that intends to follow the rules, a lot of people don't. Does that invalidate the event or mean that the event is shouldn't be happening in the way it is because it's not happening the way it's intended to be? That's a valid question. I don't know. I think that I guess my friends yesterday were saying that Burning Man is essentially libertarian, where it's a lot of, do a lot of stuff that all the people aren't doing too much oversight on you.
Yeah.
And I think there's beauty in that, but then like the freedom that you don't always have from society. But society is important, and organization, whenever you have a bunch of people, you need to have trust that other people are going to behave well. And people don't. What do we do about that? Like, maybe we should start excluding people. Well, so excluding people who don't abide by the rules. Like, one example of where they do that is that with the leave no trace thing, they do a map of the whole city afterwards, saying, how was your MOOP map? So MOOP is the matter out of place. And one thing that people do is they'll see something going by and they'll shout MOOP, potentially, at least when you're earlier on.
Like if you like changed the area around you in any way or dumped things.
Like, you see a tennis ball floating going by because people put it on their bikes.
Yeah,
I wasn't so good about this year. I didn't bring a MOOP bag with me, and I should have. Like just around in the
just
desert.
to pick random things
Yeah,
up.
I should have, and I didn't. But you can like pick stuff up and throw it away.
Yeah.
I mean, you throw it in your own trash then, because there isn't trash receptacles anywhere.
Yeah.
But the idea is that on your campsite, you have to do a cleanup at the end. And the organization will put out a map saying, here's how these different areas were. There's green, there's yellow, there's red. And yeah, we do our best to clean stuff up. Now, if you're going to bring a bunch of shit into the desert, you're not going to get everything.
Yeah.
So maybe, is it hypocritical? Yeah, maybe. And I don't love being hypocritical. So that wouldn't be an ideal conclusion. But if it's what's true, then it's what's true. And
yeah, and I'm not trying to like put any judgment on this. Like you said, there's a lot of like beauty in this event and like how people are doing it, and like I'm all for letting people like live their lives and enjoy what they want to enjoy, but there is but we can't be anarchists.
Right, I would agree that we shouldn't be anarchists, yeah.
Yeah, like society wouldn't function without some kind of like social contract.
Right.
And I think that the principles here are like trying to be that social contract.
Yeah, but how do you enforce the contract is the question.
Yeah, and I guess you really can't in a lot of ways, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of it too, recognizing that in society, we expect people to follow the contract and we're aghast when they don't. We think, oh my God, what an idiot you are. And we don't know what was going on for that person and why they didn't follow the contract. Or maybe they had some extenuating circumstance.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't understand the contract in the same way that we do. And we can't impose our understanding I don't think we ought to impose our understanding of the contract on people. There's a phrase that happens at Burning Man called, people say, fuck your burn. Mm-hmm. And that basically means the interpretation that you have of the principles and what you want to get out of this, that's for you. You get to decide what that is. And I don't have to accept any of that from your interpretation. Sure. I get to have my own burn, my own experience, and my own interpretation of what I should be doing. And that's, I think, the radical self-expression part, where you're like, you get to decide how you are going to inhabit this space.
What makes it so radical? You mentioned that a lot.
Well, it's
used a lot.
It does say, it says radical in the things. I wouldn't call it radical. I think radical there's a little, like, ooh, look at me, radical. So I don't love the use of the word there, but that's what they call it.
I guess how would you use radical, or like what does radical mean to you in this context?
So I don't usually think of I say radical as part of the title of the things because that's what they have there.
Yeah.
They
use the word a lot.
They use the word a lot. Yeah, I would say what I think they mean by radical. Who's they? But what I think is meant. No, it's passive. What I think radical means there.
I'm not going to judge you for your use of passive
voice.
Well,
no, but it's like I'm learning as a writer, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like to say something passive is to say less, or to get rid of who's actually doing the thing.
Yeah, and ironically, you say more to say less.
By being passive?
Yeah.
Well, you use more words.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I mean.
Right, yeah. But you convey less, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think that the radical there is do this thing in a way that isn't usually done. So try and do this in a way that you don't usually. Yeah. Like the radical self-reliance, which is, I think, one of my favorites because I'm not very good at it, is you see a problem that you want fixed and you can do something about it, go and do it.
Yeah.
Don't wait for somebody else to have the idea. Like, you can consult with people. You can ask others, does this make sense? Am I going to damage the camp by doing this thing? Is this a good idea? Do you have any thoughts on whether it ought to be different than my conception of the solution? But you see a problem. If you see a problem and if you have things that you can do about it, then please do.
Yeah.
Duocracy is what some folks in my camp have called our camp.
Duocracy.
Yeah.
I like
go
that.
and do the thing.
Yeah. Go and do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So stuff like that makes sense to me, but I imagine like there are the contingent of people that treat Burning Man like any other pet festival,
right?
And they're like, okay, I'm gonna just go get drunk, do drugs,
right.
like,
and there are people who treat society as differently than others in society do.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that that's a part of human society and any large group of people. So I don't think that this is a special criticism against Burning Man itself. I think it's a criticism or
An
observation about human society.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do about it. And I agree that it's a problem. Or it is at least a difficulty where people are going to be using society or living in society differently than the bulk of people, the philosophical ideal might see it.
Well, maybe it's not. I don't think it has to be a problem.
Uh-huh.
I think that if the society does a good enough, like if the society does a good enough job of like maintaining like the needs of people and like setting a good baseline, then like yeah, if people want to veer off and like make their own little micro cultures or something like that, that's perfectly fine. That's what we've done. Like what humans do, right?
Right.
I think the issue comes in where where radical self-reliance turns into like radical like ego, like selfishness, and like you have people that are like maybe the rich people aren't as radically inclusive of the
Sure.
poorer people, and then maybe you have a splintered society
Yeah.
where they both have different goals or different ideas of what it is, but one side has a disproportionate level of power over
Right.
the other just merely by the resources.
Right.
And so I think that's where things can get problematic. But otherwise, like, yeah, if you like do what you want, as long
Right.
as you're like giving back to the community in a way, either through like the kindness you show to others or the kindness you show to the land, like respect. It's like there's a respect element that I think is key to society.
We were told when it was all muddy, when it rains heavily, we're not supposed to venture out of camp. We're supposed to shelter in place. Definitely not supposed to drive or bike because that's worse for the playa.
Yeah, it turns it turns the ground into paste.
Yeah, and so it's worse. It's worse for the area itself, and it's worse for the other people in the community because then they can't get around afterwards as well.
Yeah.
Like the airport was probably still fine because nobody's really walking around there, so they'd be able to land once it dries out. But throughout the rest of the city, people are walking there. Some people are driving when they shouldn't be, and it tears up the ground. And so that's a case where you at least have to maybe shame someone locally, right? Like censure them. But what do you actually do? There is no real law enforcement of Burning Man. There's rangers who will try and settle disputes or tell people, no, you're not supposed to be doing that. But what are they actually going to do?
Yeah, and it's tough since a lot of people come into this society with still the preconceived notions and assumptions of the society that they live in, mostly from the U.S.,
Right.
where because of like capitalist and Judeo-Christian principles, we view ourselves. We don't even think of the land as like an entity that needs to be preserved.
Right.
So when people see the rain, they're like, "Oh, cool! I'm gonna go take a drive, or I'm gonna see what burning the campus looks like, or what the site looks like in the rain now," without thinking about the damage that they're doing.
Right.
They're like, "Oh, I don't need a shelter in place. It's just some rain." Well, like you mentioned, the shelter in place is less for you and more for the land.
Right.
And so because we don't have this like idea of being this concept of being stewards to the land as being a big part of our society, like I think it makes sense that people would abuse it in that way and not even think twice about it.
Yeah. I think we don't have the conception. Well, we think a lot that we're going to take advantage of the environment and the infrastructure as well to accomplish what we can without, like, we're going to try and climb up this ladder and not care that much if we splinter it on the way up, as long as we got up it.
Yeah.
But we need to try and go carefully and all take ladder repair kits with us if we can and try and fix the things we do. And if we see damage that other people have left, just maybe by use or by neglect or by um, not incompetence, willful,
Ignorance.
willful, yeah,
Yeah.
uh, then we should try and repair it and try and help with its upkeep, because there's going to be other people using it. We're going to keep using it. Other people are going to keep using it.
Yeah.
And we, the it shouldn't fall upon the latter people to uh, uh, this is stupid. Well, it's fine. It's fine. We shouldn't, it shouldn't fall on the last folks to. It shouldn't fall only on the person who's around when it breaks to fix it.
Yeah. And that's supposedly why we have governments and things like that, right? Where like we should have an entity that, because it's a big pain, and it's like very inconvenient to have individuals try to like completely maintain the environment, because it's such a big thing and requires a lot of resources. That's why that's what we should be having a government for, to like help take care of that, be the steward, and maybe charge us more taxes to do it, because like we should have this mentality of not just like sustainability, but like preserving and preservation of our environment.
But again, though, preservation is at cross purposes with change, and change is going to happen. At what point, like, who gets to decide what things should be preserved and what things should be allowed to change?
I guess ultimately that's a good point. And maybe that's where we end up being selfish in our ethics and say like, well, whatever does the best to keep the world around enough that for enough generations, or like doesn't cause ecological disaster that would lead to the deaths of like hundreds of millions of people.
Right.
That maybe that's the ethics that we take.
But would that be true? Suppose there were an outside force like another asteroid, right? I mean, I guess we want, it's in our interest to avoid asteroids hitting the planet because we live here. But and change, like if we leave things alone, change will still happen.
Yeah.
Should we be preventing change altogether? Like if we were around and if the dinosaurs were intelligent enough to have a space program, they would have preferred, I think, to not the dinosaurs. If a dinosaur species had been intelligent enough, they would have preferred to redirect that asteroid and make it not hit Earth, and they would have had as much right to preserve their society, such as it would have been, which it presumably was not. They would have been as much within their right to preserve their society as we would be to preserve ours. But that comes at the expense of anything that might happen later, anything that might happen through the change. I think that the change isn't... None of this is foretold, right? None of this is destined. And so there isn't any existence that is, I think, fundamentally privileged over the other possibilities.
Well... But there are some changes that we've had more influence in.
Oh, sure.
It may not have happened without us.
No, I would agree that, like, the suffering that is coming because of human-caused climate change is deeply unfortunate. And if we care about
and
the
potentially cataclysmic.
Yeah, but cataclysms do happen, though. Yeah. Like, the thing that matters is we're like the conscious experience of all of these people is going to be shittier. Lots of things are going to die out, which again happens, and life will flourish afterwards. The question of we have to figure out what our goal is. If our goal is have a lot of people not have shitty lives, then we should absolutely be trying to address climate change and mitigate it.
Yeah.
If our goal is that fewer things should die out, well, that's like, oh, well, right now I would like things to not die out because I live here now. And my offspring, my descendants will live in a world that is richer if things don't die out. But the history of the world that is ahead of us is enormous. Mm-hmm. And the preservation of the world as it is, I don't think that can be a fundamental goal. Like, I'm not happy that the climate is changing. I think that my kids will be less happy because of it. I think their kids will be even less happy, probably.
Yeah.
but like it's, I don't know. I guess I struggle with forming absolute opinions about things and
Yeah.
deciding that something is better than something else, because objectively, none of it is better than any of the rest of it.
I agree to that. So maybe that wasn't the right framing of it. Maybe it's more of, and as we were talking about this, I'm thinking going back to the whole idea of like an ideal society, in my view, takes care of the needs of the people.
Okay.
Housing, food, water,
Okay.
air now.
Takes care of it, or gives them the tools to take care of it for themselves.
Either way.
Sure.
However they implemented it, whatever.
Sure.
Just as long as like you have, as part of being part of this society, part of the contract means that you don't have to want for food. Like you should be able to get nutritious enough food. Maybe it won't be the most delicious food.
Right.
You should be able to access fresh water.
Right.
You should have shelter. You should have clean air.
Mm-hmm.
And I see climate change as a significant threat to many of those, if not all of them.
Sure.
Like fresh water is drying up. Islands are, like coastlines are sinking, which is threats to like housing.
Right.
Like droughts are affecting like food production. So like in my view, this ideal society would want to tax the perpetrators. Like climate change didn't just accidentally happen.
Right. And there were people who kept saying, no, it's fine, even though they had data suggesting it wasn't fine.
They knew. Yeah. There's enough paper. There's
Right.
enough of a paper trail that we know who to charge.
Right.
And I think that would be very fair to do. The oil execs got to be paid lots and lots of money. Congrats to them. But the way our society now is formed is less to minimize the suffering for the maximum people and more to like increase, like to maximize the wealth for like very few people.
Yeah.
It's similar. It's basically like we've kind of shifted back to our feudal roots in a way. Like these billionaires are basically lords.
Fortunately, they don't have the explicit power of life and death over anybody.
Not yet.
God. Oh, boy.
I mean, how many of them have like some security forces and like at what point?
How many of them do have security forces? Like,
I don't know.
I mean, the only security force I really know about, like Blackwater, I think.
Yeah.
Then I knew about Wagner, but
Yeah.
only because of the Ukraine stuff. And other than that, I don't know who's got private military, mercenary groups. Those have also existed throughout history.
Yeah.
And
if we think that they don't exist now, like we're probably kind of fooling ourselves.
Yeah. No, yeah. There's a lot of organized, hireable muscle out there, and I'm fine with not knowing how to access any of it, but that doesn't make it not be out there. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't want any. I don't want. I mean,
yeah, we're not looking to hire.
Yeah, no. Maybe bodyguards if we get notorious enough. But like that, still those bodyguards are not going to be like slamming people into the ground. And really, we shouldn't need bodyguards because everybody should be safe.
Yeah, yeah. But it's this like.
I think it's a question of what you want the organizing principles of society to be. If you accept that that society ought to be conscious people moving about and trying to do their best and not stepping on other people, then that implies a different set of values and a different way of living in the world than climb up by any means necessary.
Yeah.
And I think they're kind of different ways of looking at the world. And I guess I wonder whether that's about the differences in people or whether it's about the differences in the ideas that live in them. So I've been thinking about, are you familiar with like memes as not living exactly, but self-propagating, self-replicating units, kind of like Richard,
like of culture?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've started to think, so I read, the Selfish Gene a while ago. Read a book about memes last couple of years. I found it very persuasive that while they aren't alive, they're not themselves real. These ideas do live in our brains
Yeah.
and transfer between people, and to a similar extent that genes want to be replicated, the ideas want to be replicated in that they tend to do so, right? They work for their own propagation, and if they don't, then they don't stick around, just like with genes. I When I think about the things or the people that I don't like, I've been thinking more like I don't like those ideas that they have, but the person in there, the conscious experience, I find it more difficult to hate them, I think.
Yeah.
But we can't just say, oh, you don't have any responsibility. It's the ideas that have taken hold of you, the mind virus. Because I think they're all mind viruses. All ideas are mind viruses. They're all things that live in us and want to propagate. They're not necessarily going to hurt us.
Why do you think they want to propagate like a virus?
Well, simply the if something tends to propagate, and the thing that is better at propagating will tend to continue to propagate. So it's just that the things that are propagating are propagating.
Which is why a lot of reactionary like content and ideas usually will propagate the most, because it evokes like very strong
stuff.
emotions.
Right, right. Those things that tend to tap into our emotions have that advantage. I think that it's not so much that they want to. The wanting to is sort of a what is us anthropomorphizing. They don't want anything. The genes don't want anything. But the things that tend to like even, I mean, I guess.
But we probably want to share ideas to find other people who share those similar ideas.
Yeah,
because that's a way to connect.
It is a way to connect, and we, as individuals, do better when we're around other people whose ideas are similar to ours, because we don't have to spend all that energy on fighting about ideas, and we're accepted more when other people share our ideas, the other people around us. I think we do worse in terms of our actual cognitive honesty, because if you're around yes men or yes people, your ideas aren't going to be as good overall. But it's more comfortable to be around people that have similar ideas. And so I think that the ideas imply different ways of living. So there are ideas about which, like, I ought to climb up. It's okay for me to climb up using other people and push them down. That's one idea or set of ideas. There are another perhaps competing idea or set of ideas that I should not be disadvantaging other people in my own pursuit of happiness and comfort. Those ideas are at odds with each other, and they are hosted within people. People have those ideas. Those ideas are not the same as the person. And people can be convinced of different things. Different ideas can take hold and pass between people, be communicated between people, set down and then read later. And now with the AI stuff, the ideas can start to live in another medium even that is itself active, which is very interesting, I think. But I don't know, the people themselves are not the same as the way that they want to live. People choose and grow into ideas over their lives. And I think it's difficult to figure out, how do I change somebody's ideas? How do I give them new ideas or argue against the ideas that I have? How do I combat the ideas? What should we be doing, and how do we decide which ideas we want to choose, which ideas ought to win? Because we're going to pick we get to decide, at least to some extent, because I don't think we have perfect free will, but we get to decide which ideas we're going to champion, which ones we're going to accept being around us. And I guess the ideas are not conscious, except insofar as they live in us and get to be thought about. So those ideas, like we get to decide which ideas we're going to accept and which ones we want to get rid of. That was, I guess, like any podcast, very rambly.
But I get the idea though that like we are separate from our thoughts. We are separate from our emotions. I'm very aligned with that.
I don't know if we're separate from our emotions. Our emotions are sort of in us, and
well, I think they kind of pass. I think it's similar idea as thoughts. Like I am the one that has the thoughts. I'm the one that has the emotions, but the emotions are still like not really me. Like if I'm hungry, it's not like I am a person who is hungry. It's just like it's just a feeling right now, and that I'm going through. But like maybe that's just a way that different ways that people view these things, right? But I think the point is that going back to this whole like not judging people based on the ideas they have, it's recognizing that there is someone else, there is a human there that has their own journey, that has their own complexities, has gone through their own struggles. Maybe there's a reason that they have latched onto this idea that I don't agree with, and I can maybe accept that.
I think we should at least be able to accept that we don't know what somebody else's conscious experience and interaction with those ideas is. I don't think that we necessarily have to accept, like, if somebody is a Nazi, right? Or somebody holds up Nazi ideals, should we just say, oh, well, you know, they've come to that in their journey, and there's not a lot I can say or ought to say about that to combat the idea. I think, you know, we should try and defeat, like, I'm comfortable saying that the ideas or memes or thought, like the concept of Nazism is bad and evil, and we should try to destroy it. That doesn't mean destroying the people who hold it, but it does mean not letting them just choose to be Nazis. Or if we do that, I mean, but then you get into re-education about stuff and forcefully excising those ideas from people, and that's also very problematic. I think it's fine to touch on these topics and to think about these things as long as you're like, oh, well, that sounds bad. I'm not sure that this is a good idea. Because, like, you know, I don't want to put Nazis in re-education camps either. Like, I don't want them to be out there, and I'm not comfortable with them being Nazis. But, like, do we re-educate? Like, do we forcefully take the idea out of their head? What do we do?
Maybe in that case, it's like we try to get them mental help. Maybe there is like something like a deeper struggle that they need to talk through someone. Maybe they latched onto these reactionary ideas because of the pain that they have inside that they haven't been able to address. So maybe it's not a re-education camp, but maybe it is therapy.
Sure. But it's still us deciding, like, we're still deciding that the idea is bad, right? We have decided that Nazism's bad. And, you know, from their perspective, they have decided differently. And we're still saying, oh, no, we're more right than you, and we're going to use that authority, that rightness that we have decided we have, and we're comfortable that we have, to take away the freedom of the person in some way. And you're saying, no, we use therapy. But that's still us deciding that
some ideas are maybe a little worse off for us. Yeah.
And like I'm not trying to say that Nazism is good. Certainly, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't think that's. I think it's pretty obvious that I'm not saying that. But one thing that I think is a little more controversial that I do think I hold of is that we can't know for sure that that we're right about the ideas that we think are bad or good. Like, I think there's very good reasons to think that Nazism's bad. It diminishes people to be lesser than other people. And I guess on that basis alone, it's like, wow, bad. This is a bad thing.
Yeah. So, but like, is that a big basis? I mean, obviously I agree that like any idea that puts other people as other, or like honestly anything as other and like worthy of exploitation, I think is wrong.
Okay.
And that's something that I try to push against. And I actually see very contemporary versions of this today, where like people, like the way that people talk about the homeless is, to me, like it's very similar. Like I've heard people because going back to memes, there are reactionary memes, and there are a lot of reactionary memes about like homeless people being zombies. Because usually, like, if you're malnourished, if you're like mentally ill, if you're in this situation, any mental issues you have are gonna get exacerbated because of your situation. If you're like malnourished, you're not able to really function well. So like people joke online that they're like zombies. And I've had people like friends
and need to be done with as in the Walking Dead type.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like when you start referring to humans as zombies, even if you're not saying like, okay, we should go zombie hunting,
right?
There's enough cultural media, like meaning to what a zombie is and what you do with a zombie that like, then it becomes like, it kind of normalizes violence. Like you could be like, okay, well, this person like looked like they were gonna attack me, so like I would be totally okay with killing them.
Right.
And so where does that line, like, is that an okay idea that we should like be okay with?
Is that an okay idea? No, obviously.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess what you're exploring is what do we do about those ideas that people have?
Yeah, the ideas that we haven't like fully decided are universally bad, like Nazism, but like are of the point where, okay, maybe this is like 30s Germany, which is like
getting there.
Yeah, getting there.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe we need to explore whether we have any authority to ultimately decide this idea is bad, and now we're going to like what do we do with people who hold that idea? I think that this feels like, as I'm saying these things, it feels so insensitive, right? It feels like it comes off as like, oh, we can't really ever say that an idea is really bad. You have to allow people to have their own ideas, and I don't know. I think that there's a lot of potential discomfort in being completely philosophically and intellectually honest, and like maybe, and to some extent, the ideas themselves are not human, right? Like the ideas are not feeling, and making sure that they have their light in the day and all that. Ideas don't have rights. As we have conceived of them, because they're not conscious. Should they? Because maybe, are they conscious? Do they have this experience? I've started thinking that, at least in fiction, they could be like...
Maybe maybe that's a whole discussion for a different time.
Sure.
For a different podcast.
Well, I mean, it's not like we've been having one conversation.
Yeah.
But where were we? We were talking about the zombie thing. I think that the idea that somebody else is zombie-like comes from an incomplete understanding of their experience.
I agree. And fear.
Fear,
absolutely. That, like, if things go wrong, I could be in that situation too.
Fear, not just... Okay, yeah. I thought you were saying fear of that person, but no, totally.
But, yeah, I mean, a little of both.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And sort of disgust.
Yeah, like, disgust.
Like, I've had a lot of... So I believe that I'm on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum, and I've had a lot of like some amount of disgust growing up when I was like, wow, this person, and I have ADHD. Wow, this person doesn't know how to regulate themselves. Ugh, I hate that, because I see myself in that, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. I hate that about myself, so I'll hate it in this other person.
Yeah.
And I do. Your battery's getting low again.
I know. I saw.
Plug it in again.
So we're gonna. I ran out of ports.
Oh no. Sure.
So we'll wrap it up on this thought.
Sounds good. Yeah. I've forgotten it. Or oh yeah, like the fear of something that I see myself in and
Yeah.
hope not to be. It's hard to it can be hard to recognize that as not a failure in the person who is inhabiting that state. It's a whole multitude of factors like society. And even if it were a fault in that person, they're still experiencing it, and they shouldn't be demonized for
Yeah.
whatever
They're
situation
still
they're
human.
in. Yeah,
Like just like us. Like we should have a little bit more empathy toward others. And I think that's the ultimate thing. Like if your ideas start to like encroach on empathy,
yeah.
that's where we come into problems. Well, thank you so much, Yossi. This is a lot of fun.
Thanks so much
We'll
for
have to
hugging
have you on again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Soon.
I'd love to.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you so much for listening. Like and share the podcast. Follow us on Instagram at authentic.chaos. And as always, embrace your chaos with kindness. Thank you so much, and thank you again.
Thank you.
All right.